Welcome to The Pivot with Rocio, the podcast. A podcast about the juxtaposition between emotional and mental stability during your season of pivoting. I am so happy and thankful you're here. I'm beyond excited to connect. Make sure you have something to take notes because here we're going to school. Hi, welcome to Pivot with me, Rocio. This is episode 2, and I couldn't be more excited. So happy you're here. This week has been a very busy week, which isn't new for me. I'm actually in LA recording in my daughter's / my bedroom. But we do what we have to do. I packed my mic, and with technology, I'm thankful I can do this. But yeah, episode 1 was so well received. Thank you guys so much for listening. I listened to it myself and had so many fun notes. And it's funny because this is a podcast that my goal with this podcast, and I think I mentioned this. So there's a few things you'll learn about me on this podcast. Let me just rewind a little bit. One, I got a concussion about 13 years ago snowboarding. And I realized about 10 years ago, I was having a conversation with my girlfriend, Ileana. It may be more like 8 years ago. And in the conversation, I realized that I did not remember how I met her. And she's like, I said, Ileana, how did we meet? And then, of course, she walks me through how we met. And as she's throwing these clue words, which is like, this is when I worked at Sean John. So imagine, I don't even know, that was in 2002, 2003. We met. She was working in advertising. She was one of the very few Latinas I met in the industry back then, in that publishing space. And we became really great friends. But it was that moment that I realized, holy shit, Rocio, you really forget things. So I constantly am taking notes. I'm constantly writing things on my phone. So I do want to start this episode by saying there may be things that I repeat 150,000 times, but if I repeat it, it's worth taking note and it's worth being repeated. Nonetheless, I am so excited to be recording this episode. I'm so excited to be recording the Pivot. It's something I've circled and prayed about for a while. The goal of this podcast is to really have you all leave with tangible steps. I mentioned on episode 1 that it's like when you go to a workshop or you go to a seminar or you go to a event, a conference, and you leave super excited and you leave motivated, and then you're kind of like, okay, but what now? How do I do this? What steps do I take to whatever it may be, start a business, become an entrepreneur, be a better mother, learn arts and crafts, whatever it is that is of your interest? It's like, I feel like a lot of times we leave excited, but like for me, for instance, in my field, I realize that I take for granted everything that I know to build a brand, to start a business, to really build an intellectual property. And for me, it's second nature. I've been doing it a long time, but then I have conversations with people and they're like, oh, like the word website or social media now, obviously, which is a whole different space of marketing that didn't exist when I first started in this business, or a business plan or goals or, KPIs or all these little acronyms that to me, I take for granted. Other people don't know. So I feel like we tend to take what we know and what we do on a daily basis for granted. And what I don't want to do with this podcast is ever have people leave only encouraged and not feeling equipped to take on the world or take on this pivot or take on this new journey, whether it's professional or personal. My goal is to always have you as a listener feel like you have tangible tools and steps. And again, I am sharing with you intimate details of things that have worked for me, things that haven't worked for me. So I always hope that you learn something, gain something, make note of something on every single episode. It's like I want you to feel like you're at a keynote speech every single time, which no pressure on me, but I aim to please. Another thing I noticed on episode 1 is that I told myself that I would speak a little slower because on Things Mommy Never Told Me, which is the podcast I have, shout out to Diana, who is my co-host and my sister friend. It's a very conversational podcast. We discuss different topics. It's very like, yes, we do research and we, gather information, but it's definitely more of a light, humorous podcast. So we're like typical Latina, super, super chatty, talking over each other. I definitely forget shit. I definitely speak over her way too much. So I noted on the first episode that I wanted to speak a little slower. And then in re-listening to the episode, I said, damn, it really sounds like I'm reading. And of course, I have bullet points, I have notes and things that I want to touch upon, depending on the subject of the episode. But, I wasn't reading. So I said, fuck that shit. I'm back to being me. New intro, new outro, which I can't wait till you guys hear the outro at the end of this episode. And I'm just going to be Rocio and speak the way I speak. In episode 1, we discussed redefining yourself, developing new identities. And I know that's something that's hard, but I know you can do it. We talked about the importance of meditation and prayer. For me, it's meditation. To you, it may be, meditation and prayer for me. Definitely big on the prayer. I literally talk to God all day long. I literally check in with him whether I take a left or a right. I literally sometimes go to a corner and just ask for peace and patience as I single mother this situation out with my daughter. So we talked about the importance of that. We talked about the importance of checking in with yourself. We talked about who's in your circle. We talked about understanding your triggers. These are all essentials, but not everything, obviously, that I feel like you need to redefine yourself and create a new identity. This pivoting journey is so personal. It's not linear. So if you're in it, and if you want to quit, baby, I'm here to tell you, hell to the no. You will not quit. You deserve your heart's desire. And don't let the hard days or things that intimidate or scare you stop you. We are so quick to be deterred by a lot of times things and thoughts that are literally just brewing and spewing and creating, and we create these scenarios and full stories with beginnings and middles and ends in our head. And it's so crazy because I've been there as well, where you get super excited about something, whether again personal or professional, business related or intimately related. It's like, you come up with this idea and you think it's brilliant and it's something that can fulfill someone else's need. And then we do this thing where we kind of crowd source. We kind of try to get feedback from people, which, by the way, focus groups are great in business, and we'll get to an episode about that. But a lot of times what we end up doing is scaring ourselves or being intimidated or talking ourselves out of something that 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, we were so hyped and encouraged about. So on this podcast, you're definitely never going to get that from me. You're always going to get, you can, you will. It's not a matter of when, it's a matter of how. Like for me, I've listened to several masterclasses. And if you haven't subscribed to Masterclass, I, in full transparency, haven't listened recently. They have changed their format. I don't necessarily love it. But when Masterclass first came out, I believe it was during COVID, and my sister and I subscribed to it. And I listened to Bob Iger, who is now, again, currently the CEO of Disney and that whole conglomerate. There's been people on there, the previous CEO of Starbucks. There's Sarah Blakely, who I love and am manifesting to have on this show. If you don't know who Sarah Blakely is, she created Spanx way before Kim Kardashian created Skims. So she's the OG. But I mentioned Masterclass to say, one, it's a tool. It's a very inspirational tool. There's all kinds of people on there. There's artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, meditative spiritual experts. So that is a subscription that may be worth it for you. But one thing that many, if not all, most successful people, whether they're athletes, entertainers, entrepreneurs, no matter what they do, have said is that they were hesitant in their season of pivoting. They were hesitant in a season of change, and even in a season of consistency. They were scared and worried, but did it anyway. I say that to say you are not alone in having dreams, having personal passions, having professional passions and pursuits, and having that internal dialogue of fear of something that is stopping you, of something that doesn't allow you to tap into your greatness. So on this podcast, we are going to continuously tap into your greatness. And we are not going to let these narratives that we tend to form in our head have any space here. Did you hear me? We're not doing that here. Okay? Please remember and know that no matter if your journey in pivoting is personal or professional, know that without failure, you will never know the taste of success. And really, more importantly, a change, a pivot in any area of your life is always a personal choice. What does that mean? So yes, professionally, entrepreneurially, if that's even a word, you want to try something new, you want to explore, you want to come out with a new consumer product. Let's say you're a huge company, a CEO, whatever. It's still a personal choice. It's still something because we are humans that is coming from a personal space. So allow yourself to have that grace as well. That being said, let's get into today's episode. Personal aspirations while having professional responsibilities. How do we accomplish, meet, satisfy, achieving personal aspirations while having professional responsibilities? It's basically the juggling act, the balancing act. How do we do this? What does that mean? For me, and I'm going to get a little personal today, having a life partner, being sick for the last 12 years, having a chronic illness really limited me for a really long time. There were many personal and professional opportunities I had to say no to, but did I have to say no to? You see that I just caught myself saying I had to say no to. I didn't have to say no to, but out of fear, I did. A fear that was created from my experiences in life. When I worked at Cole Haan and when I worked with Ellen DeGeneres, that was the time that Phil started to get really sick. If you don't know, my life partner has a chronic illness and various other illnesses that have really started to affect and take over. It's been about 12, 13 years now. But I say that to say, at the time when I was in a more traditional corporate setting, right now I'm an entrepreneur. I own a consulting business. Thank God that's very successful. I have this podcast. I have another podcast. I have some other business ventures. But when I was in a more traditional employee space, I'd say, I would travel a ton, and there were so many trips that I would have to leave early because Phil would land in the hospital. And being someone who hates, I don't hate is a strong word, but being someone who is not a fan of, and you know them, I know them, we all have them around, but people who always have excuses, like people who always have something going on, people who literally, my dog ate my homework. I missed the bus. I've never been that person. I have always over-delivered, over-excelled in every area of my life. So having to support and become a caretaker for someone whom I loved dearly really put me in a space of unknown. I was in a space of like, this is unknown territory for me. How do I do what's right for my relationship while I do what's right for work. And there were many times where I had to leave trips early. And, I had the support, quote unquote, I'll say support in light quotes, because a whole nother episode we can discuss the ramifications that I felt from having to make decisions like this. Nonetheless, I made the decision to at times leave trips early because Phil would land in the hospital. I would be worried. It was very hard for me emotionally and mentally to juggle. And even though this isn't a personal aspiration, but how do I juggle this personal issue while I maintain my professional responsibilities? It wasn't until a few trips in that I had to leave early, or Phil wasn't feeling well, or landed in the hospital, that I had a come to Jesus moment where I realized that whether I stayed on a work trip or not, I could not change Phil's health. I could not heal him any quicker. I could not make him feel better. I could absolutely show my support by being present, which absolutely matters. But I will say that Phil was always someone who was very supportive of me in my career, and was always also very honest in how he was feeling. So yeah, there were times where he would have to go to the hospital, but he knew this wasn't a dire situation. That being said, for me, it wasn't that easy at the time. I allowed fear to paralyze me, and it wasn't until I released him and his health to the Lord, and I was actually starting to tap into my piv out season personally, as it pertained to Phil. And I share this with you to really encourage you and to say that no matter what you're going through, whatever and I don't want to use the word excuse, whatever your reason or whatever it is that you're using to stay in the same spot is just that. It's a reason, it's an excuse, it's fear brought to life. Not to be morbid, but our timelines Earthside are not determined by us, or how many canceled trips, or how many no's you give to opportunities, or how many times you did show up somewhere. The goal should be to live while you're alive, not to quote Bon Jovi, but I will. And to make miraculous moments in the most mundane times, to live for those who can't at every moment at your regular day, so that when you decide to pivot out into whatever hobby or whatever business or whatever dream you want to pursue, you already know that the time you spend is spent well. Did that make sense? Am I making sense there? My mindset in saying that and sharing my story with Phil, and obviously there are so many levels to it, is if I know that my intention is to give my all and my best personally, to live while I'm here, to pursue and to dream and to do things for in honor of him, or in honor of my girlfriend who passed away from cancer 9 years ago, or in honor of Amber, who's one of my closest friends who passed away a year ago. If I know that my time in my everyday and my intention is spent and spent well, this will in turn allow me, or allows me, and hopefully allows you to feel no guilt, or at least less guilt about your time limits. Because one thing that is required when juggling, and I'm going to keep it 100 with you, when juggling personal aspirations and professional responsibilities, the one thing that is required in juggling is time. You will absolutely have to give more time, make more time, provide more time. Right now, for instance, I'm recording this podcast. It's 12:30 in the morning in LA. This is the time I had to record. And I mean, there could be reasons over reasons over reasons. The list goes on. And for me, let's say I can say a sick life partner, a single mother, an entrepreneur, a busy child schedule, family, friends, self-care, the list goes on and on and on. But developing a healthy stream that allows me to build my personal aspirations while I'm excelling with my professional responsibilities is important to me as a woman, as a human, and therefore makes these late nights and the extra time digging deeper all worth it. And that's really my goal for you. That's really something I want to say to encourage you and to always make you feel and understand that you are not alone. You do not live in a silo. Many, many times, everything you're going through, anything you've thought of, anything encouraging, anything discouraging, there is someone else, probably hundreds of thousands of other people going and dealing with the same exact thing. All right, you may be asking, all right, Rocio, so you gave me this story, we're about to dig into personal aspirations while juggling professional responsibilities. So how do I do this? And how can you potentially navigate these new waters of life, which require a true love for juggling? And listen, if I'm keeping it 100 with you, I am an expert juggler already. Do I enjoy juggling? Not every day, not all the time. But guess what? So are you. Because in this day and age, whether you're single, you're married, you have kids, you don't have kids, you work for yourself, you work from someone else, or you work for someone else, this world and society that we live in has already had us busy and definitely living to societal expectations that are many times insanely unrealistic. And yet we do it. How many times do you show up at an event that you didn't want to go to, show up at a brunch that you didn't want to go to, have to be helping a parent, have to be working, staying late, getting your kid, making sure you spend time without even knowing we are expert jugglers? So why not add to that some personal aspirations that will lead you eventually and ideally to more joy and, you know what, funny, potentially more income? Why not? Why wouldn't you open yourself to the possibility of that? So today, we are definitely going to discuss, and I'm going to share with you five, only five. I had 15, 20. Yes, I did. But I wanted to narrow it down to five tangible things that have worked for me in this juggling act called life, where I am happily achieving, pursuing constantly, trying, struggling, failing, succeeding at the balancing act of fulfilling the desire to continuously explore and have personal aspirations while not maintaining, but excelling with my professional responsibilities. Let's not forget to mention that when you finally feel like you are, I'm not even going to use the word successful, but when you finally feel like you are at a place where you can, smoothly, semi-smoothly juggle achieving personal aspirations and maintaining your professional responsibilities, there could be a space for additional income, creating a steady income. So now we're talking about the paper, the money, which, and I've always been transparent, and I will probably repeat it on this podcast 100 times, money matters. So that's just thought. That's just a little gem. Let's get into it. What are personal aspirations and how are they different from your professional responsibilities? So by definition, personal aspirations are goals, desires, things that bring you a sense of purpose. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they will blend and bleed into your professional responsibilities. Make sure you make note of your professional responsibilities, personal aspirations, and where you may feel stressed or unfulfilled. That's key. Some people journal. I create voice notes. Like for me, I have this schedule for moving my body. I do a 6-mile weighted vest hike, walk situation at least once a week. And I also use that time to either catch up with some of my favorite podcasts, which is Jay Shetty, Diary of a CEO. There's a few podcasts that if you want me to suggest, I can, in addition to this one. But I use that time to use voice notes. I'm not a big journaler. I'm not big on writing things down that are more thoughts. I definitely still am very old school in planning my day. I write everything down. I schedule everything. But as far as, making note of something like, hey, this season of my life, I want to tap into these possible personal aspirations. I would create voice notes. So I take my 6-mile weighted vest hike and I take voice notes. I'm talking to myself as I'm walking down the street, and I really could care less about who's watching me. One of my personal goals is to achieve professional and personal accomplishments that make me proud of me, but also make Sophie feel not only pride, but like she can do anything she works hard at. There's this saying that kids are basically mirror images of what they see. And I knew this going into motherhood, but living it, and shout out to the parents out there, aunties out there, anyone who is involved in raising another human, there is something that is felt when this small person is literally copying, mimicking, seeing, and then doing as a result of who you are, how you behave, how you express yourself, and just the energy you keep. So in that, I've always now, since becoming a mother, and Sophie's going to be 6 very soon, which is insane, want her to see me and see that she can do anything. If she wants to have 3 podcasts, she can do that. If she wants to have a YouTube channel, she can do that. If she wants to be a doctor who tap dances, she can do that. That is my personal and professional goal. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, they can bleed into each other. Legacy building for me is also extremely important. And what that entails financially and intellectually is what matters to me the most in my personal aspirations bucket. You may be asking, okay, but why are personal aspirations so important? I could get a hobby and fulfill my heart's desires that way. And guess what? You can do that. And if that works for you, kudos. But if you're anything like me and many people I keep around want more, not more money per se. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, money is important. I'm going to be fully transparent. You subscribe to the simple fact that life must be about much more than the day-to-day. Even if it has nothing to do with money, the human spirit, and again, I will say the people I keep around me, the people that I find to be healthy, the people that I find to be the most motivating are the people who want more in life, more peace, more joy, more happiness. It doesn't necessarily have to be more money. To identify and articulate your personal aspirations, one, we should first reflect on your interests and your values. What are those values to you? What are your interests? As I said earlier, what I find value in is making sure that my daughter feels like she can do anything. Then once you've determined that, explore different potential goals that align with them. And then you have to make sure to clearly communicate your vision for the future by defining specific aspirations and the why behind them. Your why is so much bigger than your how. Your why is everything. Your why is going to lead you to greatness. Your why is going to lead you to exploration. Your why is going to motivate you. Your why is going to give you that extra insight into, how do I balance this? How do I make this work? You get what I'm saying? It's like sometimes, and a lot of times, I deal with clients and they're so caught up in the how. And not to say that there aren't successful businesses or successful people, personally and professionally, who are not clear on their why. But you can feel, you can taste, it is tangible when a brand, a person, is so clear on their why. It's something that you feel in a space and you feel in the energy. So please never forget your why. Let's move on to defining your priorities professionally and personally. Make a list. Make sure you can know the difference between things that are urgent and things that can wait. For instance, with me, my professional goals are to start sharing all my knowledge here on this podcast. I have been essentially building brand. It's funny, I gave myself the name brand architect a few years ago, and sometimes people are like, well, what does that mean? But the reason I don't label myself just like a marketing person or an advertising person is because I feel like what I do, similar to a lot of people, again, I have been transparent on this podcast to say that in everything, in law, in medicine, in finance, there's a zillion people that do the same thing. It's a matter of how you do it, how you think about it, and how you create success with it. But in the last over 20 years, I have gained so much knowledge. And to me, it's all about prioritizing professionally and personally, hence this episode. When I said, you know what, after a few years of people telling me, Rocio, you have so much information, you have so much actual case study work. There's so many people online now who are putting out workshops and giving out information and advice. And I'm not hating on anybody. Kudos to all of you. But very few of them have real life experience. I always say, again, not hating on anybody, but it's easy to be a dancer who does an 8 count, two 8 counts, behind a phone, behind a camera. You get millions of followers. You're able to, tick, 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 or what this generation does for TikTok. But really, you've never been on a set. You've never been on a tour. You don't know about blocking. You don't know about showrunners. You don't know about production. You don't know about lighting. You don't know about staging. So there is something to be said, and I will say this until my very last breath. When it comes to professionalism, there is something to be said about experience. There is something to be said about on-hand experience. There is something to be said about having bought advertising back in the day before billboards were even digital. I remember I was making like $28,000 working for Puff, and I used to sign off on invoices every month for an $85,000 billboard in Times Square. So there's something to be said about the experience. Don't ever take your experience or your intellectual property for granted. Rewinding. So for me, my priority was to bring in mailbox money. What is mailbox money? It's exactly that. It's money that you make in your sleep. It's money that lands in your mailbox. It is an extra revenue stream. So finally kind of listening to my intuition and taking, I would say, I don't know if the word is advice, but I would say listening to what people who love me, people who respect me, people who have worked with me, past clients, existing clients, previous coworkers, etc. I have decided to start this podcast. In turn, the goal is to do more public speaking. I do a lot of public speaking. I sit on a lot of panels, but I really enjoy it. And And I knew that this podcast would provide a platform or a place for corporations or organizations or people to go to get a taste of what it is that I can talk about or bring to the table. Obviously, those things vary depending on the need. And that's a point that I didn't even have noted here in my bullets to discuss today, but I want you to always remember there is always something special about you. There is always something you have overcome. There is always something that you have gone through. There is always something that you can share and encourage, motivate, teach someone else. Please, if I can say anything or I have learned anything about myself in the last maybe 10 years is not to take my intellectual property for granted. I know I've had several situations where I'm having conversations with people about negotiating a deal or licensing or the intricacies of how brands work. Or even now with the digital space changing every single second, I will never claim to know all things about social media. Absolutely not. But I do know where to find the best social media agency or the best social media manager or the best team that can increase that social media and in turn marketing and in turn brand identification. So that's a total sidebar. So stepping back into talking about how to define and prioritize professional and personal goals, aspirations. So this podcast will serve as a resume of sorts. The personal goal attached to this is to be able to create an income stream that also fulfills me personally, which is like a double whammy. So why not? I get to talk about not only what I love, but what I know and about what comes naturally to me. So why not combine? And this is again, for me, these two arenas that can come together and create this personal fulfillment and potential financial fulfillment. What's the urgency here for me? Simply getting started. I have, as I mentioned before, a podcast that is definitely way more lax, that is more social, that is more conversation with a girlfriend. But there is a sense of urgency that is needed when you are in this space of wanting to achieve these goals personally and professionally. What works for me? List after list after list after list, which I'm sure that you too have to-do lists. It's like the never-ending to-do list. I know for me, I laugh because I'm still old school. I write everything down. My calendar is on my phone, yes, but I still write everything down on paper. My to-dos are on paper. I have copied items on one list to another. Yes, I am guilty, but it works for me. But what I have started doing is out of the 500 things I have to do, I prioritize 3 personal and 3 professional goals that I must accomplish in the day. I use the word must lightly because life happens. Kids get sick, you get a toothache, your parents call. You know, especially as an entrepreneur, you have to know that these are things that are important to you, yes, but that it's okay to show yourself some grace when you cannot accomplish those things. Number 3, define clear goals. I use the SMART method. I really love the SMART method. I will go over what the SMART, SMART, stands for. Set specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely goals for both your career and your personal life. Why is it that we can report into a boss, but we can't report into ourselves? I had this internal dialogue, and as you will get to know me on this podcast, I talk to myself a lot. I believe, and to all the entrepreneurs out there, you find yourself talking to yourself a lot. Sometimes it's good conversation, sometimes it's negative conversation, sometimes it's uplifting yourself. So I had these conversations in my head a few years ago when I was at Ellen, actually, and shout out to Phil because he's the one who brought it to my attention. He said, you know, one day I was having a stern, but I will use it, I was having a tough conversation with Phil about something in our relationship. And he looks at me and he says, why is it that you can have these very well addressed and well expressed conversations with me, but at times at work, you feel like you can't? Why is it that you can report in to a job or on a project or meet a deadline to a quote unquote boss, superior, or supervisor, but when it comes to ourselves, we're so quick to add it to the next day, add it to the next day, add it to the next day. These are things that, if you really take a seat back and think about it, will fuck up your whole shit. You can have goals for years. I know I started, and I'm still, at full transparency, I'm trying to build this brand, but am I really trying? This is separate from Pivot. I'm trying to build a consumer brand that I know is an amazing idea, that I have done for other brands, completely different, but meaning I have built consumer products. I have built brands. I have been on the team to build brands. But when it comes to myself, and I'm still working on it, I am quick to make excuses, make reasons. I can't find the right production company in China. I can't find the right production company in Turkey. That's not what I was thinking. That's not exactly how I want it. I need an engineer. I need this. I need that. It takes up too much time. I don't have the money. You know, for myself, my brand that I believe in, that I have had focus groups on, that I know can be successful. But when it comes to, I mean, okay, yes, and you will say, but Rocio, when you work for someone, you have the comfort of knowing you're going to get a check. You have the comfort of knowing that there's a budget per se. But do you really, think about it, do you really have the comfort in any position or job you've been in? I have two friends recently who were literally fired, laid off in a huge layoff, one after 17 years, one after 5 years. So really, was there security? Is there such thing as job security? I'm not telling you to not overperform at work. Absolutely not. I am one of those teachers, pet, apple, and I say that respectfully, meaning my personality is to always strive and do the best that I can, bring the best to the table. But I do need to know, is there any such thing as job security? If COVID taught us anything, it's that, to me, the answer is no. But why is it that your professional responsibilities always seem to outweigh your commitment to yourself? We are curated since young, especially in this country, to get a job. And I'll say respectfully, this country, and for me culturally as a Latina, and I know that a lot of my friends have come from the same school of, you get it, you know, you go to school, you do well, you work hard, you go to college, you get a job. Very seldom do we think about being our own boss. Very seldom do we think about, what if I want to do something different? You know, yeah, I can talk in circles and talk for ages about how we don't have the luxuries of many times, not always, of generational wealth. We don't have the luxury of having something to fall back on. It's like you hear a lot of kids in more affluent neighborhoods who take a year off of high school. You know, they graduate high school, they take the year off before they go to college and they backpack. Literally, they travel through Europe. And P.S., who knows? Because I am doing an episode about what travel and what exploring other cultures does for you professionally and personally. But having lived abroad at a really young age, there is nothing like, again, it can be considered on the ground experience, but there is nothing like living and immersing yourself in a different culture. It's just, there's nothing money can pay for that travel and full immersion into outside of your norm will give you. I wish I could, I wish I could explain what living abroad did for me at such a young age. But the combination of living abroad, coming back, moving to New York within 3 days, working for Puff, having to go to an in-store within a month. Shout out to Dowie, my first boss at Sean John, where I did not know what a step and repeat was. I didn't know what an in-store appearance was. I didn't know what the requirements were, what a green room was. I had to sign 250 pictures because Puff didn't sign all his pictures at the time. I mean, and that's a whole nother chapter. But these are all things I learned with experience and on the ground. I veer off to say, why don't we check in with ourselves and make responsibilities and commitments to ourselves as our own boss? Don't let professional duties overshadow your personal goals. This is not saying be a shitty employee. No. But in life, you have to make time for what matters. There has to be a balance between commitment to work and dedication and commitment to your personal growth. If you aspire to be the best at work, aspire to be the best when it comes to your personal desires and aspirations as well. Why not? Write down your goals, set timelines, check in with your progress, make adjustments wherever you need them. But remember, the only one you're cheating is yourself. Meaning, you can make lists and goals and goals and goals and goals and goals. 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years go by. So at some point, sis, bro, my man, my peoples, sis, which is my word right now, you're cheating yourself. I'm not telling you anything that a quote on Instagram will not tell you, but I'm telling you from someone who has lived it, continues to live it, continues to strive for greatness, continues to learn. Cheating yourself. It's like, right, you get a trainer, you go to the gym, and they tell you you need to do 3 sets of 10, right? And while your trainer's watching you, you're doing your 3 sets of 10. The minute your trainer walks away, you're like, you know what, fuck it. I could do 3 sets of 8. It's not going to make a difference. But sis, the only one you're cheating is yourself. Literally. Yeah, the extra two reps may not make a difference, but man, you're fucking with your mind. Change that. Switch that. What if you would have done the extra 2? Number 4, and Diana told me, Rocio, I heard the first podcast. I love it, but you giving out a lot of free information. And you know what? That might be true, but as I have noted earlier, nobody can do anything the way I do it. Nobody can do anything the way you do it in whatever it is that you specialize in. If you're a baker and you bake that cake, sis, and it's delicious, nobody's going to make a cake taste the way you make your cake taste. There is a goal to come out with a course of sorts, to come out with workshops of sorts. And yeah, someone could listen to a few episodes on the podcast, make notes, and go out there and try to do it. And kudos, because that's what I want you to get out of this podcast. But will it be as great as if you subscribed and got the deep dive into, really, this podcast is a high level, super high level of the tips and tricks and things that I've learned that have worked and that haven't worked. And in that, I am a very step task oriented person, which brings us to number 4, which is scheduling, being your best friend. For me, setting a routine in an environment helps me thrive. As an entrepreneur, I report into myself. Therefore, if I'm too flexible, I could easily get nothing done in a day. Once I set the mindset to report into myself a few years ago, I realized that scheduling my day as if I was in a more traditional work environment, it was going to be key to my entrepreneurial success. I promise you, this is not just because I'm recording. Entrepreneur, entrepreneurial. These are words that I know you struggle with too. But this means in simple terms, I schedule everything throughout my day as if it's a meeting. So when I was, let's say, when I was VP at Ellen, for instance, if I had a meeting at 9, a meeting at 10, a meeting at 10:30, a meeting at 12, my schedule would reflect that. So I treat my personal goals, professional goals, And again, this will be a little different for you if you're not an entrepreneur, but I treat them like scheduled times. My workouts, my drop off, my pickups for Sophie, my set time to do things, my social media planning time, my client time. I have days that are just dedicated to clients. I have days that are just dedicated to recording. I have time slots that I know automatically, you know what, I'm going to go work out. I drop off Sophie. I go work out 8:30, 9:30. I plan my shower time. I plan my travel time to an appointment. Again, allowing myself room, allowing myself grace, giving myself space, knowing that I may be late or I may be early to some things. But it brings me peace to see what's to come. It also gives me a clear vision of the day, of the week, of the month. Everyone will say it. Yes, I do too much. I am well aware that to someone else, I do too much. And there are times where I find it necessary. I know most recently, I literally just got back from LA. Um, Ironically, I started recording this podcast in LA and I'm finishing recording it on the East Coast. But 95% of the time, I tend to strive in a structured environment. I read an article a few years ago that said the most successful people set their days or their weeks up with a schedule. I remember when I had Sophie, it was crazy. People were like, oh my God, she's sleeping through the night at 6 weeks. And she was. Why? Why did I do this? Because before I had her, I knew that I needed to get sleep. So let's tie this on to personal aspirations per se. I'm a new mom. I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. I'm not a mom yet, but I knew that sleep is very important to me. And I knew that babies who get good sleep are happy babies. I read all the books. I did all the things. So by 6 weeks, Sophie was sleeping through the night. I set myself up to be present and not sleep deprived, while at the same time, I was creating healthy habits for my new baby. And in turn, we were two very happy people. Happy baby, happy mama, breast milk coming in good. You know, I have sleep. I'm not losing my mind, thank God. And shout out and a lot of respect to women who deal with postpartum, have trouble latching. I dealt I didn't deal with postpartum, thank God, but I dealt with her not wanting to latch. I pumped for a year, so it's like you can set up all these goals, but you got to leave space and room to grow in any situation, in any circumstance. Especially for me, like let's go back to Sophie, right? So I'm having her on a sleep schedule. Shout out to, I believe it's nurses on call, nannies on call. If you're interested, DM me and I will get you this book. And shout out to Shirley, my bestie, who used it for her 3 kids. And it's literally this book that when I tell you 95% of the time was spot on every growth spurt, on how she would be responding, on what she would be achieving. It is one of the best tools. I have gifted it to several of my mommy friends. So me, a Latina, right? Putting my baby on a schedule. So imagine my mom, who is Puerto Rican as can be, and she's like, nena, deja que esa nena duerma, which is like, let her sleep. But if you're like me and have goals, and again, my goal was to get good sleep, the work is required. And in the end, it made it all worth it. Happy mommy, happy baby, shutting out the noise, doing what felt right for me. Now I have a child, 5.5, 5.75, if you ask her, who not only thrives off routine and schedules, but she looks forward to it. She looks forward to knowing that on Monday she has tap, on Wednesday she has ballet, on Thursday she has tennis, on Friday she has theater. Yes, these are all things Sophie does because I told you that I do too much, but and I'm not going to get emotional. My girlfriend Amber, who passed away last year of cancer, said so many things to me. And I feel like God sent her into my life when we were in college, you know, to teach and to be literally this vessel of wisdom. But she said, I'm raising extraordinary children, not ordinary children. And with that comes work. It is a lot of work to raise great kids. It really is. Idle minds is the devil's playground. You see those moms who are going to games and game after game and traveling and carpooling and whatever. And shout out moms and dads, parents, people, because especially now in 2024, raising exceptional children takes time. It takes a lot of time. And we don't always have that village. But the more you achieve, the likely you are to being happier when you have some sort of understanding of what's to come. Balance in your routine is key. Well, it is for me. I create daily and weekly routines that incorporate times, both work and personal aspirations. Let's not forget, regularly reviewing my goals, regularly adjusting, circling back to grace. I set time aside monthly and quarterly to review and to adjust both personal and professional goals. You do this by revisiting what is feeling good and what doesn't. I do this by checking in with myself. How did I get to this point of checking in with myself? It's probably been a few years. I had to do a lot of shadow work. I had a lot of time with a therapist. I had some time with a life coach, which I always thought was bullshit. But whether it's a life coach, whether it's a friend, whether it's a YouTuber or a motivational speaker that you love, or anything that speaks life into you, allows you to create these habits. And for me, it's this constant checking in with myself, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's professionally, whether it's a project. How does this make me feel? Has something shifted? Did this one feel good? And does it no longer feel good? Does this feed me in any of the categories that are important to me? Financial, emotional, physical, mental. Remembering flexibility is key in many areas of life. When I first came up in the game, it was all about hustle, hustle, hustle. Having 1,000 things to do was like a badge of honor. It was like, and I say first came up in the game, so this is 2002. I'm in New York City. I'm working for one of the biggest Black brands, Black-owned brands in the history of entertainment, really, not just fashion. And having 1,000 things was like a badge of honor. We were made to believe that being able to do everything at the same time was the only way to success, when really it was the only way to be burned out, to be stressed, and probably moody as fuck and unhappy. Shout out to everyone who put up with me during my Sean John days. And if circumstances change, so should your aspirations and priorities. That's what it comes down to. If you're checking in with yourself and you're like, this hustle shit, this isn't it. This relationship, this isn't it. This feeling, this isn't it. When we started dating, it was this. When I started this job, it was this. Change what matters to you, for me, is not an option. Changing what matters to me, for me, is not an option. There always has to be room for balance, for growth, absolutely 100%. But you always have to leave room for your non-negotiables. That is the true key, in my opinion, to living a fulfilling life. Lastly, and most importantly, number 5, fuck what people think and say. It's that simple. But if you need me to break it down, I will. Overcoming guilt and pressure is the key to juggling personal and professional fulfillment. I will repeat that. Overcoming, which means get the fuck over it, guilt and pressure that a lot of times we do to ourselves, we put on ourselves, is the key to, and I will say something here, successfully juggling personal and professional fulfillment for whatever reason. And in many cultures, and I know me as a Latina, the guilt and the pressures come heavy. Guilt with family, guilt with parents, guilt with friends, guilt with siblings, guilt with, who am I? What am I? Can I? How do I? Shit is heavy. And for whatever reason, we heavily put ourselves in places where we heavily depend on the thoughts of others or what people think or what people say or what will people's opinions about me be? And we really fall victim to the guilt, the mindset of what will other people think if I choose me? Yes, guilt, pressure, blah, blah, blah. But there is also something about when you start setting boundaries and when you stop giving a fuck about what people think, when you are doing this to choose yourself, it's harder than anything else. What am I saying? When you step away from the guilt, step away from the pressures, and it's because you started a new job. Cool. People justify it. It's because you became a mother. Cool. People justify it. But the minute that you say, fuck that, I'm transitioning out of this mindset because I want better for me. I am choosing me. Why is it that so many times it becomes this thing of, oh, you think you're better. Oh, she thinks she's too good. Oh, she's going to be this. Oh, you don't have time. Shut that, shut that, shut that, shut that. Shut the voices off. And I'm going to be the one to tell you respectfully that if that's the feedback you're receiving, then one, that ain't your crew. And two, you absolutely are better than the crew that ain't your crew. Get it? If the feedback that you get from any crew, friendship, group, family member is not one of productive criticism, and I hate the word criticism, productive opinion, meaning don't tell me about buying a house if you've never bought a house. Don't coach me on a relationship when your shit is falling apart. You get what I'm saying? So if the feedback isn't one of uplifting, of pouring, of productive criticism, because I do believe that if someone, I will always say, I know what I don't. I respect people as they are. I meet people where they are, but I also respect people who have achieved or done things that to me are fucking dope or things I want to achieve. Maybe not the exact same thing, but meaning putting in the work, putting in the hours and fulfilling this achievement. If that's not what you're getting, that ain't your crew, and you absolutely better than that crew. In episode 1, we discussed about 10 key steps and tools you can take to tap into redefining yourself and exploring new identity. And many, many, many of those tools you will hear me repeat because honestly, what I'm sharing with you on this podcast is not brain surgery. What I'm sharing with you on this podcast is a person who has been successful professionally and is continuously working personally and professionally in life to be better, to be the best, to always present my best self. And it's not brain surgery, but sometimes you have to hear things that you already know on repeat. You have to hear things or see things that other people have gone through to feel like me too. You have to put yourself in situations to start really filtering through what is it that you're consuming. So last week we discussed, actually episode 1, we discussed 10 key steps and tools. Many of those things are going to cross over many times on this podcast in different ways. How do I overcome guilt and pressure set by others that really serve no purpose and do not feed me in any way? Societal pressures definitely impact our decisions to not prioritize our personal growth. Through prayer, meditation, and I use the Bible app. I've used Calm, which shout out to Mel, was one of the dopest gifts I've received. 1 year on my birthday, my girlfriend Mel gifted me a year to the Calm app. And I meditated probably at least, 150 times every morning. Just because simply, one, the Calm app is great for meditative, for establishing that meditative space, but two, looping it all together. I would meditate in bed before we got out of bed with Sophie. So I'm now achieving two things. I'm starting my day in a meditative state while I'm teaching my daughter that this is a great way to start your day. Whether it's prayer, meditation, journaling, definitely find ways to prioritize your personal growth, regardless of what society is saying. And for me, the first thing I go to is prayer and meditation. I talk to God all day. I talk to Him all day. I listen to worship a lot of the days. I balance, baby. Life is about balance. A song might be Bad Bunny. The next song might be Maverick City. Balance. Boundaries. We discussed boundaries. I mentioned boundaries earlier in the last point. The inability to set boundaries, or the bullshit that comes with people who will never understand your reason for growth, or the season you are in, or your why, which honestly, nobody needs to understand your why. Nobody. But if you feel the need to explain or have to be transparent about your desires to grow, that's on you, sis. But it's not necessary. Set those boundaries. Your support network. Who is in your crew? Addressed. If the crew you with ain't the crew that's pouring into you, you're absolutely better than the crew, and you got the wrong crew. If your friends, if your hubs, if your groups cannot rock with you in every season, but especially a season of all things that are bettering you, of all things that are aspirational, then I hate to tell you once again for the 100th time, those are not your people. By the way, when growing in these areas, sometimes it's best to seek people who are on a similar path. Join a class. I mentioned before, I want to get better at public speaking. I want to become more dynamic. I want to be a more dynamic public speaker. So I joined a improv class. Everyone in the class is there for different reasons. Some people are retired. Some people are younger. Some people want to be actors. Some people just thought it would be fun. Some people took, improv in a corporate training and got the acting bug. So I joined the class to, one, meet new people, two, fulfill once again a step, a part in this professional and personal goal to do more public speaking, and three, to surround myself with people who have similar goals. Yeah, they may not want to be better public speakers, but everyone has a desire to show up in their spare time, or not spare time, make time to attend this improv class. And I love it. There's seminars. There's now a new level to networking that will not only feed you, but can also lead you to new connections and relationships. Obviously, there's LinkedIn. Obviously, there's Instagram. Obviously, there's networking events. In full transparency, I am not a big networker. I am more, as I mentioned, of the organic sense. I am more believing that every interaction is an opportunity. Every encounter is room for opportunity. The trick here is, if you decide, let's say, I have gone to many women's events, I have gone to many business workshops, seminars, etc. And something that I do, shout out to Eileen, first of all, I consider myself someone very fashionable, but also someone who puts thought into how I present myself to the world. But when I go to these events, I do purposely try to wear something that will catch someone's attention. Whether it's a shoe, a hat, a special print, something that's like, ooh, girl, that's cute. A conversation starter. I remember I went to a women's event and I had on a few years ago these sequence booties. I had so many women come up to me. I was speaking on the panel, and it was almost like their way to introduce themselves and have deeper conversation. I love your shoes. Those are so cute. Where'd you get them? Bam. That's the intro. From there, conversation flows naturally. You're good to go. That's your way in. That's creating a new network. That's making a new friend. I think this event had to be 7, 8 years ago. Eileen and I are still friends. I met her because she complimented me on my sequence booties. You exchange energy, and you know whether this is something that you want to bring into your network, friendship, professional, whatever it may be. Self-care. I cannot emphasize this enough. Always make time for you. Whatever that looks like to you, whatever that looks like on you, whether it's a walk, whether it's massages, whether it's working out, whether it's getting your nails done, whether it's watching a movie, whether it's sitting and doing nothing. Catch that vibe and make sure you write it for the designated time that you have scheduled, because now you're taking my tips and my tricks and you're scheduling. You're a scheduler now. So I'm talking to someone who's a scheduler. If you say, I'm going to sit from 5 to 6 and read my book, you set that timer if you need to, and you dedicate that time to you. Self-care is one of the things, especially as women, that we constantly put on the back burner. We constantly make it the last thing that we get to. Stop. Stop doing that. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot pour at all if your cup is empty. Make sure that you identify things that for you are defined as self-care and fulfill them. Schedule them. Make time for them. In turn, you are making time for yourself. Lastly, let's fucking party. Never, ever, 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 ever forget to have fun. Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx, I think I mentioned her earlier in this podcast, is one of my favorites. I don't know her. I'm manifesting to have Sarah on the podcast, but she always says something. Why can't business be fun? Like, where did business become something that has to be so not enjoyable, so not fun? Why does discussing professional goals for you, let's say outside of your work, has to be seen as a task? It can be fun. Life is hard enough. Why aren't we seeking more joy in the avenues that we are paving? Why can't things simply be more fun? Reflecting on achievements can motivate you to maintain balance and fulfill aspirations. Think about it. You have to celebrate the wins. You have to celebrate the small wins in life. You have to celebrate thinking that you had this, and now the doctor's saying, oh, you know what? It's not as bad as we thought. Celebrate that. Acknowledge it. Do not fear that celebration will lead to disappointment if and when this thing doesn't come to fulfillment. Get that mindset out of your head. Please. This isn't even in my notes for today, but if I can say anything, what you think, how you think is as you are. Life is fucking hard as it is. Why? Why would we make it harder? By being in a shitty mood, by claiming bad days instead of bad moments in good days, by having negative expectations, by going into things pessimistically. Why are you deciding to make that energy, that attitude, how you lead into defining your personal and professional aspirations, responsibilities, growth? Let's shake that shit off. Shake it off. Bueno, mi gente, I hope these practical tools and takeaways provide value to any of you looking to enhance your ability to balance life effectively. Again, my goal is always to empower you with actionable strategies to achieve a more balanced and fulfilling life experience. I want you to feel like you are leaving this podcast with something. If I can motivate one person, then fuck it. It's worth all the work to edit, to load, to do this, to do that, to create social for this podcast. As always, please remember, life is made of a zillion small moments. Stop waiting for a big crescendo moment. Stop waiting for God to come down on a cloud. It will lead to fatigue and overwhelming sense of failure. Start one step at a time. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you feel like you can do anything, and above all, I hope you feel loved. I love you. Have an amazing day.
Thank you for listening to my mommy's podcast. We hope you enjoy. Make sure to follow, share, and subscribe. Sophie Robinson on this episode and Rocio Castro, the owner of the Pivot. Love you. Peace out.